Jawbox is an exceptional band from the DC area. I was turned on to them by dear college friends of mine at Penn State. Some of them were musicians, some weren't, and none were music majors. I am so very thankful for them getting me into Jawbox. The album we're discussing today is without question a desert island CD for me. I've been mentioning it to you for 25 years now, a quarter of a century. Now I'll finally get you to take a deep dive into it. This great group began back in 1989 and ended up on Dischord Records in 1990. Personally, I consider them to be uncategorizable, but I guess from their early years they were clumped in with the hardcore bands of the day. I generally don't agree with that, but whatever. By the time their third album was released, they moved to a major label, Atlantic Records, changed their sound, and added a spectacular drummer in Zach Barocas. By the time this lineup recorded their second album together, the band was firing on all cylinders. The songwriting, individual performances, lyrics, and pristine production from engineering genius John Agnello were all present in full force.
This week's suggestion comes from my dear friend and musical collaborator, Eric Sanders. In 1998, I attended a show at Smith's Old Bar. Not 100% sure, but I believe it was the Hellborg Lane Sipe Trio. Met Sean Lane at my dad's studio back in the day. What an absolute monster. And while I was there, I ran into Colonel Bruce Hampton. At that point, I had been living in Atlanta for 5 years with no gig and no band, so I asked him for some help in getting something together. And he gave me Eric's number. Eric had moved from New York to Atlanta after he was hired to be a member of Colonel Bruce's band, the Fiji Mariners. The two of us added Brooke Smith, who we both knew as a member of the Grapes, and thus was born the Yeti Trio. And that was 25 years ago, believe it or not. Eric requested the self-titled album by Jawbox. More than just requested, he bought me the album for my birthday. If you hang around with Eric for long enough, there are a few artists that will just naturally come up at some point, like Hank Mobley, Joe Jackson, Paul Gilbert, and Jawbox for sure. And apparently Jawbox came up in DC, influenced by the late 70s, early 80s DC punk and hardcore scene. So like Bad Brains and Dag Nasty. But knowing Eric, just high energy level and cutting lyrics aren't enough for Jawbox to be held in such high esteem for him. So I'm guessing there's more to them than just attitude and volume. Well, I put it off long enough. After 25 years, I am finally going to listen to Jawbox. All right, Eric, why don't you tell everyone what I should be listening for?
There are so many aspects to check out as you spend a week with this beyond brilliant album. They are so unique, so don't go in trying to equate or match them up to any other group in any style or subgenre. Sure, some aspects here and there might trigger something for you as a comparison, but I'm quite confident this album will be unlike anything you've ever heard in your life. The songwriting is fantastic and not at all formulaic. If you follow along closely enough, you'll laugh and ask yourself, how did they do that? Jawbox are literally like no other band ever. No song rambles on for too long. And don't go listening for guitar solos, for there are nary a few, if any. There is a ton of odd meter throughout. It's often slick and surreptitious and always very cool. I want you to check out the incredible vocal rounds and cannons that happen on a few of the songs. You'll hear that on Livid, His Only Trade, Chinese Fork Tie, and Empire of One. Besides the cool and difficult to pull off vocal performances, Jay Robbins is a brilliant lyricist and quite the linguist. Back in the day, their old website had a tab called a lexicon that included dictionary definitions of their many made-up terms, most of which were perfectly logical tenses of existing words. This band has a doctorate in etymology and are so clever. Be certain to consult the accompanying lyric sheet, for plays on words are plentiful. There are also some out chords, Hammond organ, and saxophone interspersed throughout the record. I know you're going to dig all of that. It might not jump out at you upon first listen, but it's in there.
Don't know that I expected that. There are elements of Jawbox's music that place it in time to the mid-90s post-grunge and post-hardcore scene, but that doesn't tell all the story. Even if I said that there are times I was reminded of Soundgarden or Smashing Pumpkins or Sonic Youth or Dinosaur Jr. or even Wilco a bit, that doesn't tell all the story either. Part of what dates the sound I am hearing, for sure, comes from the producer, John Agnello, whose other works include albums by Dinosaur Jr., as well as like Sun Volt, Kurt Weill, and Drive-By Truckers. Interestingly, it turns out he engineered some of the stuff for the third Bob Dylan Greatest Hits collection too. The other thing I'm noticing right off is that the album feels longer than its 47-minute and 49-second runtime. Not because the songs drag, but because there is so much informational density to these songs that my mind automatically goes to a more kind of focused level of attention. Kind of like why it seems longer to drive someplace the first time you do it. Plus, packed into that 47-minute and 49-second runtime are 15 songs. And a couple minutes of silence after Absenter and before the Secret song, Cornflake Girl. I do want to discuss each of these tunes on the album, but because there are so many, I'll just hit the high points for most of them and focus more on a couple of the standout tracks. Miraful starts with a grunge-sounding guitar playing a dyad figure with contrary motion behind it. The rhythm section plays a groove that has strong high-energy post-punk vibes, but more harmonically interesting, not just simple power chords. And the sung melody extends the harmonic complexity, often adding notes that are outside the scale implied by the bass and guitars, with a second voice doubling the choruses only 2 beats back, kind of like the start of a round. All done with a lot of energy against a very approachable groove. Strong opener. Livid's opening groove feels almost like found music, right? Like they recorded the cycle of some industrial mechanism. Melody and chords of the chorus have some REM vibes too, only much more aggressive. The mid-tempo groove in Iodine feels very grungy, but the song form is odd, subdivided into bars of 3, or maybe 6 if you feel the groove in halftime, which it very well could be. Plus, I think I might hear mallet percussion on the last chorus as they're going into the last bit of the chorus. That, or wood blocks that just happen to be tuned to fit the chord. Very clever groove on his only trade. It's in 4, but broken into like 3/8 and 5/8 with a drum pattern that has the same loping, stumbling feel of a lot of Captain Beefheart's more challenging tunes. The call and response vocals really work well in this one too. The drums start Chinese fork tie with a very inventive groove. It immediately reminded me of something that might appear on one of Eric's Drum Monday videos. For those of you that don't know, for the past several years without fail, Eric has posted a new composition for drums every Monday on Facebook. Unlike most drum videos you might have encountered, he's not playing along with an existing track, and he's not just blowing chops. He actually composes entire pieces of music for the drum set and records a performance, often highlighting inventive odd-metered grooves and melodic tom work. Chinese fork tie's drum intro has a lot of those elements. Right, precisely. High energy on this one too. Cool harmonic dives on the choruses, plus whammy pedal goodness in the instrumental bridge. The drums come in pretty strong on the intro to Won't Come Off too. Most memorable thing for me though is the syncopated bass line in the Think the Shaking Stopped sections. I think the shaking stopped, the shaking stopped. Excandescent is an early favorite for me, definitely the most memorable. The individual parts are not less challenging than any of the other tracks, but somehow the overall effect in this case is more melodic, with some discernible and clever modulations happening in the chorus. Plus, the guitars get all twangy and warbly in the verses. Spoiler has a killer opening. High energy, jangly groove in 7. More contrary motion in the dyads created by the vocal harmonies, too. Simple 2-part counterpoint like Coltrane uses in India, that kind of thing. The extension of the intro for the odd meter bridge near the end I thought was pretty nice, too. Desert Sea starts off with more odd meter, this time a kind of lumbering bass line in 5, and they maintain the 5/4 meter for the entire song, with the drums adding these clever little tom flourishes at the end of each phrase. All through Empire of One, it feels as if it's about to come off the rails, mostly due to the main backbeat being pushed forward by a beat. That and the frenetic bass line and the Rashawn Roland Kirk style sax near the end. Mule/Stall is a heavy waltz with perhaps the most Captain Beefheart main groove of any song on the album, complete with Zoot Horn Rollo inspired single guitar breakdown. What's kicking in? Another 5/4 groove in Nickel Nickel Millionaire, could be where the name came from. Much higher energy than Desert Sea though. They really push this one. Capillary Life reminds me a bit of some of what I heard on Soundgarden's Down on the Upside, mostly because the main groove is constructed in such a way that it's damn difficult to pull apart the meter. It's certainly some repeating pattern of alternating bars of 7/8 and 4/4, but it's often hard to tell where the bar line is. And I dig the reharmonization of the main guitar figure against the flat 6 in the verses. Absenter is a strong closing track, but here's where my time working with computers has done me a bit of a disservice. See, Microsoft has a framework tool that you can use with Visual Studio when you want to create apps for iOS and Android mobile devices. And that framework is called App Center. So each and every time they sang Absenter, I heard I love the Tori Amos original version of Cornflake Girl. And I like that Jawbox was able to maintain the churning funkiness of the original groove while dropping and adding beats to create these little odd meter moments peppered throughout the song. This is a strong album. There's a lot to like, and I feel there's a lot I haven't uncovered yet. So while Eric talks a bit more, I'm going to dig deeper. All right, take it away, Lars.
On one of your run-throughs, please focus on the extraordinary drumming. The drums themselves sound so good, and the playing is incredibly tight and inventive. Zach's parts playing and melodic drumming throughout are simply spectacular. Check out the continual displaced backbeats on Livid, the beautiful Tom's melody on His Only Trade, the incredible intro to Chinese Fork Tie. I have the 7-inch single of that framed in my den. The foot-stomping groove of Won't Come Off, the solid and easy melodic playing on Excandescent, the heavy feel on Spoiler with the fun 3 bars of 7 at the beginning, the brilliant and easy 5 of Desert Sea, I play that song for my college students, and the complete command of the kit on Empire of One. The 4-bar phrases in the verses of Capillary Life begin with 3 measures of 7 before ending with a bar of 4/4. And of course, the heavy 5 of Absenter. You get the point. Every song is a study in and of itself when it comes to musical drumming. Make sure you let the record I bought you as a birthday present continue to spin after track 14 finishes, the amazing Absenter. You'll be rewarded with the coolest version of the awesome song Cornflake Girl by Tori Amos. For those who don't know, I believe the story goes, Tori and Sarah Jessica Parker from Sex and the City were child actresses, and the two were finalists for a Cornflakes cereal commercial. Tori was the runner-up and wrote this song. Jawbox covered it as a hidden bonus track on their self-titled disc and gave it their typical odd-metered treatment. Hone in on their bars of 7 and 9. It's so cool. Cornflake Girl was released as a single, which I showed you earlier, and there was also a radio promo for it. There was a 4-song radio promo as well, and another promo CD that came out before the album was even released. Like most bands from back in the day, Jawbox are back in business, so check them out as soon as you can.
Quick fun fact before I give you my reflections on Jawbox. Turns out I had heard some Jawbox before and didn't know it. The album that they released in 1994 was called Your Own Special Sweetheart, and the single from that album was Savory. And the video for Savory appeared in an episode of Beavis and Butthead.
Whenever I go to a birthday party, I just like tear open presents and break stuff and just run around and I go, "Ah!"
I think that Eric's assessment that the self-titled album by Jawbox ultimately defies any real categorization. I think that's a fair way to describe the music. This is a unique combination of 90s post-punk and post-grunge groove sensibilities and sonic palette, combined with harmonically interesting and often dissonant independent guitar and bass parts, and a compositional aesthetic that falls somewhere between the Magic Band and Soundgarden. But while there might not be any direct analogs I can easily point to, I think I can place Jawbox in a larger context of innovative albums which might not be immediately apparent. The three things I kept thinking of after repeated listens to Jawbox were Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco, and believe it or not, the calmer music pieces by Paul Hindemith. Not that Jawbox sounds anything like any of them. Let me make that clear right off the top. But the one thing they all have in common is that they present music that has all the trappings of a known and established style. Post-grunge and hardcore for Jawbox, early 80s alternative for Sonic Youth, alt-country for Wilco, and expressionist chamber music for Hindemith. But in each case, they build complex and often dissonant harmonic and rhythmic structures that set them apart from the genre from which they originated. Look, Emily is definitely a fan of the 90s grunge and post-grunge scene. And as I was listening to Jawbox this week, the one thing she kept telling me was how it surprised her that she hadn't heard it already. If you, like Emily, are already a fan of that era of music, this is going to feel very comfortable in a lot of ways. But if you're like me, who prizes intelligence, cleverness, and the unexpected in your music, there's an awful lot to like in Jawbox. I definitely see myself listening to this one a bunch of times, even after this week is done. Good call, Thalarmus. Final thoughts. Scale of 1 to 10, I give the self-titled album by Jawbox a lifetime subscription to the Microsoft Developer Network and a box of cornflakes. See you next week.